Presight. It is our third day here at Presight, and we're talking money, other people's money really. Andrew Reakes is the director of Presight's financial services team. Andrew, it's lovely to see you. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, and welcome back to the Presight headquarters.
Well, we're lucky to have you, I understand. You're on a plane in a couple of hours, and you've been signing deals left, right, and centre. I have to admit, when I think of Presight previously, I have thought of government solutions, I have thought of intelligent cities, I have thought of infrastructure. I haven't necessarily thought of the banks. Where does financial services in your team fit into this?
Yeah, no, so firstly, thank you very much. What you've said is absolutely correct. Those are areas that generally, they're areas that we focus on. But financial services are growing, a growing focus for us. It's traditionally been an industry that's really been built around stability. From a regulator, from an investor, from a citizen perspective, we've really looked for organisations that are fair, that are explainable, and ultimately that we trust, which is actually absolutely fundamental and core to how Presight operates. But what we've seen over the past few years is a huge amount of disruption. From startups, from fintechs, from digital banks, from investment platforms, and digital transformation has been top of mind for all of the C-suite, and AI is absolutely fundamental to that. What it's really allowing organizations to do is really transform and really disrupt how they operate and how they engage with consumers.
Okay, well, let's dig into that. That's a nice big picture overview, but let's actually have a look at what's happening in practice, and conveniently you've signed a bunch of deals that we can use as examples. So let's start with the deal that you have signed with the Central Bank of the UAE. What practically will the pair of you be doing? Yeah,
so the joint venture with Central Bank is a technology service-based joint venture. It's about embedding Presight at the very heart of national infrastructure. We're looking at how do we transform the financial infrastructure in the UAE and more broader globally. What we're really focusing on is how do we develop, how do we maintain, and ultimately how do we support long-term key platforms, whether it's instant payment, whether it's digital currency. And ultimately, long-term, that's going to be powered by AI.
And how am I going to feel that on a day-to-day basis? And I speak as someone who, still writes a check to buy a car or to rent a flat.
Yeah, so I think more and more what we're seeing is that these organizations are embedding AI into the very nature of how they operate. It's not about adding on a bolt-on tool. It's about embedding it into the day-to-day processes. So, it becomes intuitive. You'll see hyper-personalized solutions. You'll see banks offering you hyper-personalized loans, car insurance.
I'm going to be honest, a lot of my dealings with my bank at the moment don't feel hyper-personalized. Customer service here has long been a discussion point for banking. You've just tied up with the Emirates Institute of Finance and a number of banks in a multi-bank deal. What do you see banks, again, really practically doing with AI? Not to save them money so much, not to get rid of some of the back office functions, not to reduce headcount, but to actually make a difference in the way that we deal with them.
Yeah, so, we announced the partnership, and not only is it Emirates Institute of Finance, it's our sister company, Core 42, but it's also, banks that we deal with on a daily basis, whether it's M-Bank, HSBC. What this is really about is how do we explore AI applications in the real world? You mentioned about back office. That's absolutely a key area that's going to be transformed. But what we're really focusing on here is that exploration of how does the bank engage with us? How do they identify us as a customer or a potential customer in the first place? And then how do they offer out tailored solutions and tailored capabilities and services, specifically for you and specifically for the organization? This is beyond just about AI. It's about how do we apply intelligence across the financial services ecosystem.
What does it do, though, to remove bugbears, to remove phone calls from people trying to sell you another credit card when you can't even get your old credit card loaded up onto your Apple Pay, asking for a friend? What does it do for the very almost, human frustration that comes with banking around the world?
Yeah, and I get that. I think, it doesn't remove that entirely, but what it does, it allows these organizations to be hyper-focused in terms of where they engage. So when they call you, when they speak to you, they know precisely what they're calling and speaking to you about. So you're not getting this kind of blanket discussion. You're getting a solution, you're getting a service that's really tailored to your demands and your requirements.
I was an IT reporter 20 years ago when the internet was just becoming a thing. How does this differ from what we were telling people CRM solutions were going to do back in the day?
Well, I think, I've been around the technology space for a long period of time. I think what's really interesting about this and what's really interesting about this shift is it's not just about technology. In the organizations that we're really seeing accelerate and adopt this, it's technology, it's the CIO, CTO working in conjunction with the lines of business. The lines of the business are the teams that fundamentally understand how they engage and how they operate with their clientele and their clients. And so it's the two really work in tandem. It's not just about delivering technology, it's actually about delivering technology in line with what the business is looking to do.
How do we then mitigate some of the risk with all of this? Because the third big deal you've signed is with the guys with Dow Jones, very big grown-up financial information providers, looking at developing AI native risk and compliance solutions. That's great. A lot of the new risk that's hitting banks at the moment is also AI generated, whether that comes from deep fakes, fraud, phishing, etc. Poacher or gamekeeper?
Well, I think, if we look at this, if we look at what we're trying to do here, we recognize that this is a huge area. Risk compliance within organizations is fundamental to how they operate. It supports all of the front office functionality. What we're doing with Dow Jones here is really leveraging, their capabilities from a data perspective that they've built over decades, using our sovereign-grade AI to look at how do we implement AI agents into this in a trusted manner.
1 minute left with you. If I was to speak to you a year from now, what do you want to tell me that you've done?
I think we're seeing the market is evolving so quickly. I think what's brilliant here, we've got visionary leadership at both a state and within the enterprises. I think what we're seeing more and more, and what we'll see over the next few years, is this will become invisible, yet empowering for us as a consumer. It's ultimately going to be delivering services and capability that are transparent, but most importantly for the sector, trusted.
Is the success going to be when we stop talking about AI in the way that we no longer talk about new media?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're seeing. I think organizations have become laser focused on not adding AI as a bolt-on, but actually how do they embed it into their day-to-day operations.
And it just becomes the norm.
Exactly.
Andrew Reakes, Director of Presight's Financial Services team, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.